To finish the moment, to find the journey's end in every step of the road, to live the greatest number of good hours is wisdom. These words from 19th century poet and philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson could serve as the motto for one modern-day man of words and action. Sonny Eberhart is well known in the long-distance hiking world for his accomplishments. He's one of just a small group of people who have hiked every mile of every National Scenic Trail in the U.S. That totals somewhere in the neighborhood of 18,000 miles. Add to that the more than 2,000-mile hike between Chicago and L.A. on the Mother Road, historic Route 66. And speaking of historic, in 2004, Sonny, who goes by the trail name Nimblewill Nomad, hiked the Lewis and Clark Trail from St. Louis to Cape Disappointment in Washington State to mark the 200th anniversary of the Voyage of Discovery. 2 years later, he hiked the trail from west to east to commemorate the return voyage. Sonny retired from hiking in 2018, and since then, he has served as the caretaker of the trailhead of the Pinhoti Trail near the top of Flagg Mountain, which towers above the tiny burg of Weguffka, Alabama. I had a chance to meet up with Sonny in November of 2020. I drove to the top of the mountain to share a song I had written for my friend after hiking with him some years earlier. He had no idea the song existed until I played it for him. After sharing the song, he and my wife Leah and I shared an evening of pleasant conversation around the fireplace in the ranger's cabin on Flagg Mountain. The following day, Sonny agreed to share some of his experience and wisdom in a recorded interview. I asked some fairly basic questions, and Sonny poured out his answers like a poet, pouring the wine of his experience into a cup. By the way, along with being an accomplished hiker, Sonny is a poet and an author. He's written several books detailing his experiences and the lessons that he's learned along the trails and byways that he's traveled over the years. The lessons relate to life in general as much as they relate to hiking. When did you become a thru hiker? What led you to the hiking lifestyle, the backpacking lifestyle?
No, Russ, I've always been an outdoor boy. I had a beautiful childhood. I was Huck Finn. The last day of school was just before Memorial Day, and my shoes had come off, and they wouldn't go back on until the first day after Labor Day, which is when school started again. So all summer, fishing pole, bib overalls, and a straw hat. That was my childhood, and so I've always been an outdoor person. I love the outdoors. Ended up in a practice. My profession was such that I was boxed up in little cubicles with no windows in them for 30 years. So that sort of pent up desire to be free and to be out with nature and go and enjoy the wind and the sun and the water and the whole thing that's involved with hiking has to do with three different components. It's your physical, mental, and then if you're willing to and want to spend some time with it, the spiritual aspects of hiking. So I missed all that. My formative years came back to kind of haunt me, and so when I retired, I put my backpack on and I just never looked back. I've been an outdoors person, a hiker, a backpacker all my life, and so I went to South Florida and started north, and before I finished, I'd pretty much hiked the entire eastern North American continent that year. So it's my way of life. It's a way of life now for me. When I retired, I just never looked back. I just put my pack on and went. Does that help?
That does. Now that first hike, that was you hiked from the southern, the Keys on right up through.
That hike involved pretty much the entire eastern North American continent, with the exception of way up north in Newfoundland. I hadn't hiked that part of our Appalachian Mountain Range at the time, but yes, that hike was 4,400 miles from the southernmost point on the eastern North American continent, the old stone buoy there in Key West, and I hiked to a place called Land's End. Land's End is in Quebec. It's where the St. Lawrence meets the sea. At Forillon National Park. That hike was 4,400 miles.
Now that obviously wasn't enough to satisfy your desire to walk. When did you decide that you were gonna tackle another trail or another walk?
What happened at the conclusion of that particular hike, and when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, or down here, I better get it right, it's called the Appalachian Trail.
Appalachian.
I met some folks along that basically just live on the trail. It's their home. And I found that I kind of fit into that community quite well. They were people that had pretty much the same moral values that I had. Many of them were retired military, and they just put their pack on and took to the trail. And they called themselves hiker trash. So I guess I just became hiker trash, and I loved that experience so much that I'm going to answer your question. I'm an old man now, you got to be patient with me. I loved that journey so much, that Northbound Hike, that 2 years later I went back to Canada and I put my pack on and I walked all the way back to Key West and experienced that wonderful time all over again. You've heard the old saying, you can't go back, but my goodness, I was able to do that. It was deja vu in spades when I did that southbound hike. And I loved it so much that it's just part of my life. It's the way I live now. It's the experiences that keep me at least young in spirit and young in mind. I don't think I could have a better life. And there's people that see that, and they see that it's sincere and genuine. It's real. And might I say, I think it might be one of the things that attract people to come and to be with me and spend time. And certainly my part of that is a great bit of enjoyment I take in meeting people like you, Russ, and your wife, Leah. Just beautiful people. And I've been blessed with that now out of all of this. So you see how it has a way of coming around and building on itself and manifesting all the great things that we would like to have as part of our life. And I have that, Russ. I've got that.
Now, you're a caretaker here at Flagg Mountain in Alabama. How did you come to be connected with this beautiful place?
Well, if you were running an old time camera and you had a reel going there, we'd go through that whole thing before we're done with this discussion. But I guess you have unlimited time there, and I'll try not to take up too much of it.
Take your time.
It's not the shortest story there ever was, but it's a fascinating story. When I did my northbound hike in '98 from Key West to Cap Gaspé, Quebec, along that way, I'd never heard of or knew anything about the extreme southern Appalachians, and that's what we have here in Alabama. The really wonderful, different, and fascinating. These are not rocky crags that stick above the clouds and reach to the sky like you have in the Rocky Mountains, but we have a place here that's more inviting, more at home, a warmer feeling that you get when you are embraced by these southern Appalachians that you're going to not experience anywhere else in the world. So during that hike, I got to be friends with a gentleman who had hiked all of the 8 original National Scenic Trails at the time. And And he said, you didn't go to Flagg Mountain, did you, when you did your northbound hike? And I said, no, I hiked over through Alexander City and Goodwater, and I was just trying to get to the beginning of the Pinhoti Trail. So that was my focus at the time. I said, where in the world is Flagg Mountain? He said, well, I know you're going to be doing a southbound hike. You've told me about that now. So when you do your southbound hike, make sure you go over and you hike Flagg Mountain. And I said, okay, Trick. That's a trail name I gave him. His name is Ed Talone, and he's an icon on the trail because he was the first and the only person to have hiked all 8 of those trails. So I called him Trail Icon, and we just shortened it to Trick. So Trick said, you gotta go over there and you gotta hike over Flagg Mountain. I said, okay, Trick, I'll do that. So I don't know what trail day it was. It was a couple of 100 days, I guess, since I'd left Canada again, and I was heading south to Key West. So I decided when I get to the end of the Pinhoti Trail, which is way north of here at that time, meant that I'd have to do a road walk to get here to Flagg Mountain. But I'd studied it and I figured out where it was, and then I understood from what he told me the significance of Flagg, that this is, if you're gonna hike the Appalachian Mountain Range, the Appalachian Mountain Range, you're gonna go south of Springer Mountain, which is the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. And indeed, 417 miles south of Springer Mountain by trail, there's a place called Flagg Mountain. And Flagg is the southernmost mountain in the Appalachian Mountain chain to stand above 1,000 feet. So it's arbitrary, but very symbolic. We've designated Flagg as the beginning of the Appalachian Mountain Range. So I'm coming south, and on December the 14th, the year 2000, I climbed Flagg Mountain. A memorable day. There were dear friends with me because the word had gotten out that this old guy's today is going to finish hiking the Appalachian Mountain Range at Flagg Mountain. So there were a number of people with me and shared that experience with me. I had invited you, and I encourage you to go up because you're only a 10-minute walk from where we are here at the cabins to the old fire tower. It's a beautiful stone structure that was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps back in 1936 and 1937. It's probably the finest remaining example of some of the incredibly beautiful stonework that the Civilian Conservation Corps, boys they call them, did at that time. So anyway, on December 14th, the year 2000, I came through here. The locals heard I was coming, and they opened the gate and let me go up there and experience a moment on Flagg. And I cradled my head in my arms and I leaned against those stones up there. And well, to be honest with you, a little embarrassing, I guess, but I wept for about 10 minutes, realizing that I had indeed completed an incredible journey. And I swore and convinced myself at that time that someday, for some reason, I'm going to come back to Flagg Mountain. And, well, Russ, we're sitting here in front of the fireplace in the old ranger's cabin on Flagg Mountain, and I've been here about 3 years now. So, did your film run out yet?
Nope, not yet. That was a great story, though. I love that story. I feel like that story kind of tells me that you talked about the spiritual side of hiking. I feel like when you were here in 2000, that your spirit said, this is the place. That intangible part of you just kind of knew.
It is a spiritual, and I've opened up my heart and my mind and my soul to the beauty and the benefits of what nature has to offer us. One of the driving forces, I guess, for those of us who seek peace in our life, that we can find that peace and enjoy the presence of the Lord that exists in nature. This mountain, one of the things that attracted me here, there's a few other places that I've visited along the Appalachian mountain range that have, they emit some form of energy in addition to what we could physically appreciate with the senses that we've been given. There's another element there, there's another medium there that exists that we can't see or hear or smell or taste or see, that is just as much real as our other senses. And there's mountains that emit a form of energy that I'm trying to describe to you what it might be. There's a couple places along the trail, one place along the trail called the Appalachian Trail, and that's Pomola. It's right next to Mount Katahdin in Maine, is a spiritual mountain. And then as you travel north from there on into Canada, there's an incredibly spiritual mountain up there called Sagamuk. And Sagamuk is a mountain where the Micmac and the Maliseet tribes used to gather annually at Nicktow Lake. Nicktow Lake is an amazing body of water. It has an outlet at both ends of the lake, and the lake is suspended at the base, actually part way up the mountain there, Sagamuk. And the Micmac would pull their canoes up one of the outlets, and the Maliseet would pull their canoes up the other outlet, and they would gather there at Nicktow Lake, and they would ascend this mountain on an annual basis, and they would hold council at the top of this amazing mountain called Sagamuk. You can climb that mountain and you can sit on the stones and the rocks and the boulders up there, and you are grounded about as hard and as fast and as firm as you could ever be grounded. But there's vibration in those boulders. There's vibration in those things. That's how much energy is being emitted from that mountain, and it has to do with the spiritual aspects over the eons and the magnificent, I guess you'd say, value or importance, or the spiritual aspect that those natives assign to that mountain. And so it exists. And there's another place. I've told you about Pomola, and I've told you about Sagamuk. And there's another place in central Alabama, between Birmingham and Montgomery, of all places. And it's called Flagg Mountain. And this mountain emits some form of energy that's ephemeral, it's fleeting, but it's just every bit as real as anything that you could produce that we could appreciate with our senses that the good Lord has given us. So here I am on Flagg Mountain, absorbing and enjoying and appreciation the energy that the good Lord's put here. I guess not everybody can open their souls and their bodies, their minds to what I experience here, but to me it's real, and I think if you'll sit a while and contemplate who you are and what you are and how you fit in to this universal thing that we call our earth and our heavens, that you probably will experience that energy too.
I felt it when I got here. was there ever a time when you felt like you didn't want, you couldn't go on, but you had to bring yourself out of that, and how did you do that? I guess that's a two-part question.
Well, I've alluded to the three basic mediums that we have to deal with, not necessarily any more on the trail than we have to deal with in our life, and that's the physical part of living, the mental part of living, and then the spiritual aspects of what we assign or what we can attune ourselves to and learn to accept. The trail brings on a challenge to you and to the hiker, especially the person that puts a pack on and hikes for great distances. Those three aspects of what life is, it lifts all three of those things up in a way that there's challenges there that are almost impossible to meet, let alone overcome. You would think that the physical challenge of putting on a backpack and spending 6 months with 30, 40, 50 pounds on your back, climbing up and down through the mountains and valleys of 14 states would be one of the most incredible challenges anyone could ever face. And indeed, people that successfully hike the Appalachian Trail, their lives, their formative lives are completely changed for the remainder of their life because of the fact they were able to overcome what most people feel is the most incredible challenge of all. But Russ, that's not it. It's not the physical. And I was told this years ago, and I've read about it, and I studied it, and I made fun of it, and mocked it and ridiculed it when folks would say, or I would read about, of the challenges that we face as a long-distance hiker, day after week after month. It's not the physical challenge, it's the mental challenge. And the percentages that were assigned to that is what I could never comprehend and never believe, but I'm a believer now. The challenge is not the physical, it's a mental, and it breaks down somewhat to the amounts of 80% and 20%. 20% of the challenge is physical, at least 80% of it's mental. So yes, you're out there in the wind and the cold and the rain and your back hurts and you've got blisters and you're alone and you're tired and you miss your family, you miss your friends, and you say, what in the world am I doing? And that's where the mental part kicks in. You have to deal with that, where the physical challenge becomes more easily dealt with time, because you hone your skills on hiking, you gain strength in your back and in your legs, so you're able to overcome the challenges, the physical challenges of day to day. But what happens with the mental challenge is it wears on you, and it becomes more of a challenge and more difficult to deal with time. So to be a successful long distance hiker, you've got to be able to meet and overcome not the physical aspects of what you're doing so much, but more the mental aspect of it. And I was able to do that, obviously. But the people that fail on long distance hikes usually fail not so much because their knees have given out, or their back hurts, or they got blisters they can't overcome, or other physical problems that may limit them or cause them day-to-day difficulty. But it's 80% of and here's another 80% again. 80% of the people that fail on a long distance hike fail because of the mental challenge. But see, if you take those three things now, you got the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. This is what's so beautiful about how these three aspects of our lives fit together in real life, and certainly are challenged to the extreme on the trail, is once we can overcome and deal with the physical and the mental challenges, what opens up then is the capability and the likelihood is certainly, it's a likelihood that you're gonna have to start dealing with who you are and what you are, because part of what you have to deal with on the mental aspect is just coming to grips with the fact that you're a jerk, and how you treat people, how you treated your family and your friends all your life, and what are you gonna do about that? And when you're out there for hours and days and weeks, you don't have the distractions when you start thinking about who you really are as a person, and how revolting and vulgar and nasty that, if we accept who we are and the frailties we have, what that means as a human being. So how do you deal with that? In real life, we just turn the radio on. We go get with a couple of our friends and we just have a good time, or we jump in our car and we run downtown, or we go to the movie, or anything to distract away from the fact that we need to sit down and come to grips with who we are as a jerk. And on the trail, you can't escape the fact that you have to deal with that. So you got the physical done, you got a pretty good handle on the mental, and understanding the mental aspect and trying to come to grips with who in the hell you are as a really nasty person, because we all fall short of what we need to be in God's sight to be acceptable and to be welcomed into his glory. We got to deal with the spiritual aspect of our life. And I think you might suspect from what I've told you here this morning that I've dealt with that the best way I know how to deal with it, and I've come to grips with it. I've asked for forgiveness for being the kind of person I've been in my life, and once you accept that forgiveness, you can live your life in a much more fulfilling way than you would otherwise. So in our daily lives, we have to deal to some extent with the physical, we have to deal to some extent with the mental, but it's not anything to the magnitude and the degree and the extent you have to deal with those things on the trail. The physical thing is real. I mean, your back hurts, it's raining, it's turning to ice coming down, you're slipping and falling, and you got another mile to climb to get to the top of that mountain. That physical challenge is real. It's not like opening your car door and starting your ignition. It's a different deal. And then the quiet and the absence of distractions in your life, where you can shunt away or put aside or really put off having to think about the mental aspects of what's involved in living. You deal with that on the trail if you're going to succeed. And then can you imagine anything more pure and how your life could be opened up any more full in appreciation of what nature has to offer than if you're not out there with nature, and what that has to do with your life. Can you see how those things come together?
Yep.
So the two things you gotta overcome the physical, and you gotta overcome the mental. If you're gonna be successful in life, you gotta deal with that. And certainly on the trail, you're gonna have to deal with that. You gotta conquer these things. You have to overcome the challenges they offer. But the spiritual aspect is something that's it's elective, it's not required, it's not a subject you have to take to graduate. It isn't something that we must do, it's something that we have the opportunity to do, and I've availed myself of that opportunity. And what brought it to me and what allowed that to happen, and certainly in a way that was a revelation to me, the truth and the reality of this is every year I have less and less, and every year I'm a happier person, and I just can't wait till the time comes when I have nothing, because that's how we come into this world, with nothing, and really can't take anything with us when we go, other than if we've come to know God and appreciate God and love what being with nature and what God has to offer us. The only thing we can take with us when we go is love, and it don't weigh anything. It doesn't weigh a thing. So it's pretty incredible once you get to studying and working on trying to come with grips with what we feel that we need in our life to be happy and successful and comfortable. What the difference is between those things and what we really truly need to be happy and to have a fulfilling and a comfortable life, it doesn't amount to much. I can remember when I had that bright, shiny new car parked in the garage, and I was so worried about the kids bumping it with their bicycles and scratching it. So you see how things end up owning you and you don't own things. So I worried about the kids scratching my new car with their bicycle. Well, I don't have a new car, and I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. So those burdens that we tend to load on our shoulders and load ourselves down with, all these things that we think we need, you don't need all that stuff. So 6 pounds, and I guess I could reduce it a little more than that, but I can go out in these woods in the middle of, not the middle of winter, but on a pretty harsh day. Let's say it's freezing and the rain's turning to sleet or to ice and the wind's blowing. With my 6 pounds, I can set up my camp and I can get in my tent and I can get in my sleeping bag or my clothing and all those things that I need to be halfway comfortable on my sleeping pad. These are things I have in my 6 pounds. And I can rest and sleep comfortably that night with the wind blowing and the sleet and the snow coming down, and you're not going to have to come in there and drag my butt out of the woods. I'll be okay. So it's an evolutionary process, not that in a way that we would think what evolution is, but it's a short term, in terms of time, evolutionary process that I went through, from figuring there's no way I can get by without this 40 pounds of stuff that I'm carrying with me. But indeed, I have learned to do as well or better with 6 pounds of stuff now.